observation mission on the 23rd of August 2023, harmonized elections in Zimbabwe. This report reflects the findings of our EOM mission, our analysis, and the conclusion drawn from first-hand observations over a 2-month period. That means before, during, and after the election day. Our final report also contains a set of recommendations for future electoral processes. The document will be publicly available on our website. Firstly, let me start by recalling that the EOM was officially invited by the government of Zimbabwe to observe these elections. I emphasize that our EOM engaged in this observation as a partner and in the spirit of achieving common goals to further democratic processes. It is important to view the EOM's recommendations in this context. It is up now to Zimbabweans to take ownership of their implementation. And let me say again that the European Union remains ready to assist such efforts if there will be a political will in that sense. The observation was conducted at the request of the Zimbabwean authorities and was in accordance with an administrative arrangement between the government and the European Union. The work of its 150 observers from all the 27 EU member states and also the partner countries, that means Canada, Norway, and Switzerland, that are particularly praised for their cooperation, was impartial and it was a long-term one, looking at all the aspects of the entire electoral process. While the findings and the comprehensive analysis is available in the final report for all of you to read, it is a public document that will be published online once this press conference is over. I'd like to highlight here some of our findings. The overall process curtailed fundamental rights and lacked a level playing field, which was compounded by intimidation. As a key example, the EOM observed first-hand cases of intimidation by members of the Forever Associates Zimbabwe, the so-called FAS. While election day was largely calm, it was assessed as disorderly. The late opening of hundreds of polling stations extending into the next day seriously impeded some citizens' right to vote. The delay that was most pronounced in Bulawayo, in Harare, and in Manicaland appeared to have disproportionately affected some opposition strongholds. The legal framework could have provided an adequate basis for the conduct of credible elections if implemented properly. Recent legal changes, including the passage of the so-called patriotic provisions to the criminal code, the legislative work on the private voluntary organizations, the PVO bill, and the selective implementation of the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, the MPOA, underline the closing space for the exercise of freedoms of association, assembly, and expression. Citizen observers face severe restrictions due to a shrinking space for civic activities, and also due to administrative barriers, pressure, consistent intimidation, and even mass arrests on election day that I could witness personally, unfortunately. A raid took place, fact, on election night where some 40 members of key parts of the internationally recognized global network of domestic election monitors, the GIMDEM, they've been arrested for, and I quote the police in this quote, coordinating the alleged release of election results. That is somehow also their normal job and duty to follow exactly and observe the elections. They were held without legal counsel for some 12 hours, and although released on bail, they are still nowadays facing upcoming court proceedings. During the post-electoral period, the EOM observed a climate of retribution against civil society, human rights defenders, and political party activists, and even against voters. While the EOM cannot comment on any developments after its departure, we were notified of allegedly politically motivated abductions and even torture. These reports include the recent murder of an opposition activist. I strongly and firmly condemn any violence that has occurred. There is no space for retribution, for harassment, for torture, and for murder in a democratic society. We encourage the authorities to bring the perpetrators swiftly to justice. Against the backdrop on how these elections were conducted and the post-electoral political climate, the EOM offers 21 recommendations with 7 as priority. In particular, the EOM considers that comprehensive and meaningful electoral reform is needed. This especially relates to the right to stand, to associate and to express freely, not limited by bureaucratic barriers such as the undue nomination fees. This is critical to bring legislation in line with the regional and international standards espoused by Zimbabwe. It would be necessary that the Zimbabwean authorities show the political will to engage in these reforms to lay the ground for a genuine and credible elections in the future. The EOM also recommends that measures are taken to ensure that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, ZEC, and its staff are able to operate without political influence at all levels, including in their appointment mechanism and by removing governmental approval of its regulations. Further, the EOM recommends that ZEC provides timely and comprehensive information on all the aspects of the electoral preparations to the public, including its decisions and its regulations, and that ZEC publishes timely electoral results disaggregated by police station. This is crucial also for our work. Safeguard the right of assembly, it is recommended to amend the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, the MPOA that I was quoting before, to limit discretionary application and to ensure that its implementation never unduly limits the right to assemble. And to safeguard the independence of the judiciary, our EOM recommends as well reviewing the appointment procedure of judges to guarantee a real separation of powers. Further on, the EOM recommends to establish and to implement effective mechanisms to prevent all the undue restrictions on observation activities and to prevent pressure and intimidation to both citizen and international observers. To debunk and this information before this, allow me to clarify why we are presenting, unfortunately, I would say, the final report here in Brussels. As per the EU's long-term election observation methodology, the EOM was meant to return to the country some 2-3 months after the elections. That was, of course, our will. The purpose of this return visit, and it is standard practice for all the EOMs, is to present the mission's final report to the authorities and the public within the country in which we have been observing. The EOM would also discuss the conclusions and the recommendations with local stakeholders in the country to determine possible ways forward to implement the recommendations made, and of course to engage in a cooperation if that is the will of the hosting country. The return visit of the EOM Zimbabwe was foreseen in the administrative arrangement that was signed by the EU delegation and the Zimbabwe Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Unfortunately, the conditions did not allow for it to take place. Prior to the deployment of the mission, it became clear that the Zimbabwean authorities lacked the political will to allow the EOM return visits to be carried out according to its long-standing methodology. This includes key activities such an inclusive and robust dialogue around the report, of course, and its recommendations with a wide range of stakeholders, including civil society, media, political parties. They did not provide any reason for why they saw a need to put restrictions on these visits. The EOM highlights that this administrative arrangement stipulates also that Zimbabwean authorities should have granted the mission access to all relevant interlocutors. Yet, the mission faced significant challenges to meet with official bodies at the national level, despite repeated requests and also a good level of flexibility from our side. These include, just to give a very clear example of what I'm saying, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, the ZEC, which the EOM was only able to meet once in all our observation, and which was unfortunately equally unavailable for meetings with the Chief Observer, with me, and the European Parliament delegation, the other colleagues from Parliament that came to observe on the ground. While, let me underline also this aspect, other observer organizations were granted repeated access several times. Such behavior is unprecedented in my long time as a politician, parliamentarian, and election observer. This is something that really surprised me and shocked me at the same time. This lack of meaningful access was coupled with an extensive, coordinated, and continued disinformation campaign against the EOM and the other international observation efforts on the part of some national media. This reporting was based on lies and violated any journalistic standards. These lies, published particularly by state media, put in danger the safety of our observers on the ground. While we do recognize the independence of the media, of course, we took note also that the government did not respond in any time to this defamation campaign, despite its commitment in the administrative arrangement to ensure the personal safety of all the members of the EOM. While the EOM concludes its work with today's presentation, the EU will continue to be available for further assistance. Aspirations of the citizens of Zimbabwe to live in a free and in a democratic society is a core principle of the European Union and of our action, one that the European Union will always defend no matter what. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We open now the floor for questions and answers. If you could please introduce yourself once you have the word by name and tell us for which media outlet you work. Let's try to make this work. It's a little different from an in-person press conference, but let's try to get this up and running. Raise your hand if you do have a question for us, please. Do we have any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
I see a question from Samsung SM whatever. Can you please turn up your volume, your microphone, get closer? We cannot hear you.
Okay. My name is Chris Ventabra from Choice Media Africa. I would like to ask on this final report that do you see the chances of the Zimbabwean government?
Sorry for interrupting. We cannot hear a word you're saying. Can you move closer to the microphone? It's impossible to understand what you're asking. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Still very low, the volume. Please increase.
Okay.
It's not okay.
I don't know if you can hear me now.
The audio is very bad. Perhaps you can turn up both the sound on your laptop or on your telephone.
Okay, you can hear me now?
A bit better.
Yes, it's improving.
Okay, I said my name is Chris Pentavra from Choice Media Africa. Somebody's interrupting.
Please continue.
Go ahead.
In the event that the report is like denied by the government of Zimbabwe, what are the other channels that can be used?
So in the event that the report is denied by the government, what other channels can be used?
Denied.
Denied, that's what he said. Or refused.
You mean?
Yeah. Can I answer?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. In fact, as I said, our duty is to present the report, to make it publicly. Of course, the first interlocutor normally is the government, but we also are presenting this report to the media, to the civil society, to all the Zimbabwean people. So let's say that this is something that I think the whole Zimbabwe somehow will receive. As I said, and I reiterate, that aspect is going to be published as soon as this press conference is going to end. Then, of course, it's up to the Zimbabwean government to decide if he wants to follow the recommendation we express, and if he wants to engage with the European Union, that is ready to provide cooperation, technical assistance on the recommendation as well. But of course, this is a matter of political will, and this is a free choice of the authorities. If we are requested, we are ready, we are willing to assist, but we cannot, of course, decide for the authorities. But I think also, in light of the important remarks I shared with you, that it's also a possibility, if it's decided in the sense, for the media, for the civil society to campaign in favor of these reforms, if you share, of course, the reasons, the motivation, the analysis we are going to present in the report. So I warmly recommend all of you to write that very carefully, to have a clear view, and because we assessed all single phases of the process before, during, and after the election day, always following very meticulously our methodology and our code of conduct in every single action and phase we have done. I hope I addressed and I answered to your question.
Could I also add that the recommendations that we make are long-term recommendations throughout the election cycle, and they're also geared to a variety of interlocutors. And so some of those recommendations are to the state authorities, of course, but then there are also recommendations that are made to civil society, to the media, to other interlocutors. And so over the period of the next 3, 4, 5 years, many of these recommendations can be brought to life if there is the will, as Mr. Castaldo had said, but also if there are initiatives amongst different interlocutors who are all addressed in this report.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Fabio Massimo. I'm a freelance journalist. I want to understand to what extent did this information affect the quality of the elections and the participation of women? Did your report maybe dwell on that particular issue?
Yes.
Yes, so we in fact on the mission looked at all aspects of the election process from a long-term perspective. We had both a social media analyst who conducted a full-scale social media monitoring effort. We also had a human rights analyst who looked specifically at the inclusion of underrepresented populations, including women. And so if you look at the report, there are recommendations also made towards the participation of women in the process, and also the extent that disinformation played into the way that women were able to participate in the election process. I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but if you look in the final report in the full body, you will be able to find the details of those findings.
I'd like also to add that during our conversations and our exchange with many interlocutors, most of them, they were underlined that the reforms on that introduced quotas for women somehow was also seen as a kind of reduction of the space of participation for the ordinary constituency, in the sense that if you look at the numbers and the statistics in the previous electoral elections, harmonized election, there was more participation of women in the ordinary constituency, I would say the directly electing one. And of course, this gives the feeling somehow that despite maybe the noble intent to ensure that a certain quota within the parliament, this is also a bit maybe reducing the space for them to compete equally fairly with the male candidates in the normal constituency. And a similar also consideration was sometimes raised about the youth.
My name is Anastasia Ndlovu. I'm in Bulawayo. I would like you to tell us, were the elections free and fair and credible?
Thank you for the question. I would like to remind you that it is not our job nor our commitment to give any certification of the elections. We cannot, of course, declare something like you asked, nor in a sense nor in another. Our job is to follow and to, of course, observe all the different phases of the process, and then to say if they comply or they do not comply with the regional and international standards. And in that case, I could say, as we reiterated many times during our preliminary statement, and even today, that in several cases, the shortfall, they were not exactly complying with the regional and international standards. So there was, especially because many rights have been curtailed during the campaign, even during the election day itself. You are from Bulawayo, so probably you witnessed the fact that many police stations were opening with a very significant delay. So this is the kind of analysis and assessment we are holding.
Okay. My other question is, we noted that you withdrew funding for elections in Zimbabwe. When are you likely to fund elections again? Because we are having by-elections.
So the funding was withdrawn from the European Union, and with by-elections coming, when are they likely to refund?
Well, let me say that the decision of freezing the financial cooperation and the technical cooperation was taken by the EU delegation on the ground, according to the fact that, as I denounced, there was a lack of cooperation by the competent authorities. As I told you, I have a long-lasting experience as electoral observer and as a chief observer, and it never happened in my experience, in my career, to not being received by the competent electoral commission or anyway by the electoral body that is organizing the election on account. That was a clear sign of lack of political will, because as I repeat, many other chief observers, other missions have been received even several times. And that was a bit surprising me, because we didn't come by ourselves. We came and we deployed the mission under the invitation of the Zimbabwe government that freely decided to do that, and with an administrative arrangement that was regulating all the aspects of our presence on the ground, including the fact that we were entitled to have full support by the competent authorities to provide us all the data, to provide us all the information, to have a constant exchange. So Of course, having observed that the EU delegation decided to proceed in this way, at this point, I cannot tell you if at some moment that there will be a decision again to relaunch a cooperation. I would say that everything is in the hand also of the competent authorities. If we will see positive signs, a change of approach, probably there could be the possibility to reconsider that, but it is not my duty to express any other analysis and decision in that regard, because I am the chief observer for our electoral mission, and this is a political decision that is going to be held by the EU delegation and our external action service. So all the authorities that have the duty and the right to do that.
And if I could just add that this, as Mr. Castaldo says, is outside of the remit of the EOM, but there are recommendations about key aspects of ZEC, such as their independence, their ability to work impartially, and these are the kinds of recommendations that one would expect to be worked on in the future. And in the implementation of these recommendations, the EU would stand ready to assist.
Okay, thank you on that one. My final question is on, as we are having by-elections, is EU going to observe the by-elections in Zimbabwe, or you are not coming?
Normally, we do not observe by-elections. So of course, the mission now, as I said, is ending up with this work, with the presentation of this final report. But I'm pretty sure that our competent authorities, and including for the External Action Service, will continue to be engaged and to have, of course, follow what are the further political developments in the country. But this is out of the scope of the election to continue to assess the by-election after, because our mandate is going to end with the presentation of the final report and the recommendations.
We have one more question, and then we will answer a couple of questions that arrived through the chat.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. We are very well, thank you. What about you?
Yes, my name is Marshall Bonya. I am a reporter for ZimLife. I have a few questions that I want to ask. My first question would be, if your recommendations cannot determine if elections were free and fair based on your methodology, what use is it to Zimbabwe as a nation in our plight to grow as a democratic nation? Then my second question would be, how can citizens of the civil society contribute to ongoing efforts to address the issues raised in your report, given the current reports of human rights violations that are said to persist with impunity? And my third question would be, has your mission observed any positive changes or improvements in subsequent elections since this current election that has been discredited in your preliminary report? And my final question would be, how will your mission's findings and recommendations be disseminated to the international community, local stakeholders, and the general public to ensure transparency and accountability?
Okay, so for the first one,
Society, the first one was
on free and fair recommendations.
Free and fair recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And the third?
The third I don't remember.
And the fourth?
And the fourth was on, what was the fourth? Let's start with the first one, and then we can ask to repeat.
Yeah, let's start. Maybe we will kindly ask you to repeat question by question, because of course we are not in presence, and sometimes some words could not be easy to be heard. You ask for again for evaluation for a free and fair election process. I will reiterate again once more that we do not do this kind of assessment. It's out of the scope of our mission. We can only observe and check if what we are seeing on the ground, and it was a massive effort from our side with 150 observers that deployed all around the country in each one of the single region of Zimbabwe, not simply the most prominent urban center, but also even the rural area in the most remote area of the country, to get as much data as possible, to have a clear vision of the growth process, and then to be able to assess if they are respecting or not the regional and international standards. And I do reiterate once more, of course, that this is something that in some significant cases we see did not happen because there was a clear reduction of space of the right to assembly, a clear reduction of space of freedom of opinion, significant technical problems, including the delays of opening of the police station, a climate of fear and intimidation that many of our interlocutors were underlying. And on the recommendations, once more, we say that this is something that we are leading in the end, not simply of the government, but also of the civil society, but also of all the relevant stakeholders. And we do believe that, of course, no matter what will be the political will to engage of the government, the civil society of Zimbabwe that I can witness, despite the difficult situation that we have, is still very vibrant, very active, very engaged. Of course, we'll have the possibility to do some step forward. I reiterate the final message I wanted to give with my speech, with my statement today. We are, as European Union, beside the aspirations of the Zimbabwean citizens to strengthen freedom, democracy, to have a free and democratic society, because those are also the values on which the European Union is based. And our approach is always value-based oriented. So I can really endorse and reiterate very clearly this commitment. And this is not, the mission is going to end right now, but the Union as such will continue to be present beside this important effort. Then, if I am not wrong, there was a second question about the civil society, but I think I answered already with my first answer. Could you be so kind, please, to repeat the third and the fourth question, please?
My third question is, has your mission observed any positive changes or improvements in subsequent elections since this current discredited election? Then my fourth question was, how will your mission's findings and recommendations be disseminated to the international community, local stakeholders, and the general public to ensure transparency and accountability in the forthcoming elections?
How will our findings be disseminated so that the international and local community know about what we've said?
Yes, but first of all, on the on the third question, let me say very clearly that there is no connection from one election to another. Of course, you know that we have deployed an election 5 years ago as well. There were also recommendations, but we are not commenting on this because, of course, each one of the observation in each recommendation is based on what happened in that specific elections, and therefore that would be outside of the scope of our action and out of our methodology to assess on the base of the previous mission. Of course, this is factual. Many of the recommendations that have been formulated in the previous mission 5 years ago have not been implemented. This is something that is objective and is in front of all of us. But again, I cannot comment too much on this, nor I can comment on future elections. I hope, of course, that as a personal feeling that the authorities would be keen to engage with us, to have this cooperation, and we are ready to provide technical support to start a process of reforms to support, of course, the internal process of reform, but it's not up to us to decide if there is a political will or not to engage in that sense. And of course, if there will be in the future elections and the European Union Electoral Observation Mission, it will be up to them again to assess all the phases of the cycle, to assess the legal order that is in place, if it complies or not with the regional and international standard. But again, we cannot comment on this because it's something totally in the hand of the competent authority and in the hand, of course, of the civil society for what is relating with the recommendation dealing with the civil society. How to disseminate our conclusion? Let me show you. This is the report. This is the written version, but as I said, very soon we will have the digital version that will be available on the website. Of course, we are gonna do our best to make it visible at a regional, local, national, regional, and international level, because it's important also for us to disseminate the conclusion and that's why it's totally public. And we ask your support because you are the most prominent medias of the country. So we need also your help and support to give the right visibility, to give the most the widest access to the public opinion, because we hope that with this analysis, the data, the reflections, and you put all the recommendation would be a good food for thought for the civil society, for the relevant stakeholders, for the citizens of the Zimbabwe. This is a kind of legacy that we are leaving, of course, after all the efforts of the electoral process. And as I said, it was not an easy mission for us on many technical aspects because the lack of cooperation of the authorities pushed us to have additional efforts. But of course, we will continue to remain engaged, and we hope to see comments and to see you, of course, use all these data and information to raise awareness in general of the process itself and to the work of the mission that I reiterate once more was always complying very strictly with the code of conduct and the methodology we are adopting since many years, absolutely a consolidated one. Thank you.
And if I could just add that we'll also be disseminating this report to all of the interlocutors that we met during the course of the mission. We'll also be disseminating it via social media and via traditional media in the country. And so hopefully both the report and the recommendations will be available to a wide range of the public. The EU delegation is also on the ground and has copies of the reports that they will be handing out and discussing with interlocutors about their activities. And so hopefully through these mechanisms, there will be a wide range of information about what is in the report and the recommendations that we have made.
So we have time for two more questions. I believe the questions that were asked in the chat were in the meantime replied to sufficiently. So we had a raised hand from Shingirai Vambe from the very beginning. If you should still be here, could you please ask your question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your findings of the 2023-2024 August election of Zimbabwe. You in your presentation you highlighted that the environment actually put the observers' lives at risk following the conduct by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and some of the recommendations of the working ethics that they had put in place. I would want to understand, that is my first question. Going forward, do you think you would have more observers coming to observe elections in Zimbabwe? And what in your recommendation would you propose that things may be put in place so that the issue of safety and risk is taken into account? Then my second question goes to the issue and printing of ballot papers and participation of people with disability. In your observation, what did you see as observers on the participation of people with disability, on the printing of ballot papers, for example, those with visual impairments, and those probably with a physical disability. In your report, in your observation, in the contents of the report, does it highlight part of this inclusivity? Thank you.
Yes, but we should focus on that. Take that if you want.
Yeah. But thank you very much for your questions on the safety of observers. I wanted to be very clear on that point. As I said, we have been victims of a massive defamation campaigns that started even before the deployment of the mission, even before that I, as a chief observer, arrived in the country. This was particularly harsh, led by some media that are, in some cases, state controlled by the government, or in any case, very close to the government. And in particular, there were some unacceptable, fake, disgusting, I would say, accusation, putting in question the moral integrity of our observers. Some of them were even saying that they were bribing people to push them in support of the opposition. This is simply ridiculous. And of course, it was my duty as chief observer to immediately dismantle this castle of lies and defamation. But as I said, we didn't see any official reaction by the competent authorities, by the government saying and reiterating the fact that, first of all, we have been invited by the government officially, that there is an administrative arrangement, and that they know, and they have always witnessed the professionalism, the commitment, the full respect of our methodology by the mission. This is something that we really deplore. We, of course, were paying all possible measures to protect our observers on the ground, because we have also security experts within our core team, and we were paying all the possible attention. But if there is a hate and defamatory campaign that is fueling, trying to fuel sentiment of anger against the people on the ground, nobody knows what could happen, even despite all the possible security efforts. That's why I said that from our side, we put all possible measures in place, but we would have expected a different approach by the authorities, because if you are inviting the guests, normally the first rule of invitation, and I know how much warm are the Zimbabwean people, how strong is the sense of the hospitality. The first precondition of an invitation is to ensure a full safety, and some of them, they didn't feel really safe in some moment in the deployment on the ground because of this climate of fake news, fear, and defamation that was held from the authority. On the participation of people of disability, with disability, our observers remarked in many cases that not all the police stations were adequate to ensure their full access to participation. But I will now leave the floor to my deputy, Dr. Beata Martin Rozumilowicz, to go a bit further in detail on the data set in Denmark on this issue of the participation of people with disability.
And can I also say, with regard to the safety of observers, it's not just the safety of international observers, it's also the safety of citizen observers on the ground who continue to do their work. And we are aware of the recent cases of abductions, of torture, of murder, as Mr. Castaldo mentioned. The EU spokesperson has made a statement that there is an expectation that there be a thorough inquiry into all of these recent abduction cases, and that culprits must be properly identified and brought to justice. This is also something that our EU delegation on the ground will be following up in terms of any connections to the elections and human rights abuses. So we look at this issue of safety of observers from all angles. But turning now to the question of participation of persons with disability, Again, there is a full section in the final report about this very important issue. We find that unfortunately, no significant efforts were taken to grant persons with disabilities participation. Things that we note are that the CPRD has not been incorporated into domestic law. That's the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We also reflect upon the fact that the 1992 Disabled Persons Act looks at the point of view of welfare rather than a rights-based approach, and this is something that needs to be further examined. Many of the interlocutors told us that they would have preferred in the allocation of seats to see members from the persons with disability community directly elected as individuals rather than through the quota system that currently exists. But we do make a recommendation which is quite clear, and this is that there be an amendment to the Disabled Persons Act to effectively incorporate the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability into domestic law. And this is one of those 21 recommendations that we hope will be worked on in the future to bring the level of rights, both regional and international standards, into a better perspective in electoral processes in Zimbabwe.
So we have time for one more very short question, and I see a hand from Zimbabwe. Chichanza, excuse my apologies for my pronunciation. So, Zimbabwe, if you could just ask one question, a short one, that would be appreciated. Thank you. So he seems to be offline or seems to have technical problems. At this point, we conclude this press conference. This is the final press conference of the European Union Election Observation Mission to Zimbabwe. The question was asked also in the chat when the report would be available online. It will be going public in a couple of minutes. If it's not already online, you can find it on the website of the EOM. We will post the respective link also again on our Facebook page, and we will tweet that also on X. So you will have the respective link together with the link for the press release very shortly. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a good.
Yes, just as a very last statement, we would like to thank all of you for the participation today in our press conference, for your insightful, interesting question. And I would like to personally in public express my very warm thanks to the core team of my mission and to all the staff, to all the observers that have been deployed, because for me it has been a real honor to lead such a mission with such a committed, professional, and absolutely passionate core team beside me. So that I want to really emphasize the opportunity to thank all of them, to thank all the emphasis also they provided and support with their additional observer, and to so thank the 27 member states of the EU and Canada, Norway, and Switzerland for the excellent cooperation on the ground. And once more, of course, my core team that was extremely committed in tackling all the difficulties we had to face to bring this mission to conclusion. Sorry to have interrupted.
All right, so that was the final word. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.